Hello and welcome to today's episode of Mitten Backstage. Hope you're all doing well. I am sitting down today with Alana White. Now, I met her years ago when we were both at Grand Valley State University, and I, accompanied her on some of her vocal performances. And since then, she's gone on to do work in bands like Okaycool and has since moved to Chicago. And it was nice sitting down to catch up with her about, what we've been up to the last few years. I've seen her here and there, but it was, in passing, or we share a show and we only get to talk a little bit. So it's always good to catch up with another person after so many years, but also, our lives are so much different. Because of, even just from the last year. So it was great to catch up. If you liked today's episode and you want to contribute to these types of podcasts that I produce, you can head on over to patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker. There, you can contribute at different tier levels to get early access to podcast episodes in audio and video format, exclusive merch, and more. You can also go to DutcherSnedeker.com to see everything else that I'm currently up to around the internet. And don't underestimate the power of your social currency. If you share, like, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you happen to be seeing or listening to this podcast on, any form of interaction helps the algorithm gods push my content out into the ether, and, other listeners can enjoy it just like you are right now. So that is a perfectly great way to support as well. All right, let's get into today's episode with Alana White. Cool. Yeah. How's it going?
It's going good.
That's good.
We've been on a tornado watch all day, so that's fun.
Yeah. I just, I did, I've just casually been, it really only recently too, getting back into like card collecting as a hobby. And
yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, my friend, Cabin, who I went to high school with, he is like way more knowledgeable than me. So I've been doing these like box openings with him.
Oh my gosh. Do you have the whole like binder too with your card slots?
I'm trying to get, I have, what did I do today? All my cards are all on this table, or at least the ones I opened today. But, I got like some of these kind, like some shinies and, the shiny Eevee and the,
I love that.
all these I'm just like, oh, I don't really know like functionally what they do, but they look cool.
This is like a whole world. I feel like this is like a whole like eBay world, trading world.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting too to think about like me growing up in the 90s getting these cards. Like I remember getting like, I think it was Jungle Set, or it might have been Base Set or Jungle Set, and opening them like on my, just as a kid on my driveway, and just seeing all the like, the like my friends at the time, collecting, and I didn't really play the game, so I would just literally take them.
We didn't know the value.
Yeah.
You should have told us.
Yeah. Someone should have let us know how to play this game.
Gosh, everything.
But yeah, it's, and it's fun to have like, I don't know. I thought about it carrying over from last year. I had a bunch of friends who hear all the random things I do, and they're like, do you have a hobby at all? And I'm like, I don't think so.
They don't consider anything you do a hobby.
Yeah.
I guess in their eyes, maybe it's work.
Yeah. And it can sometimes turn into it, like podcasting. It's more of a hobby right now because it's still in its infancy, but I technically earn, like $70 on Patreon from it. So,
oh yeah, we love to hear.
you know, just the trying to build all the income streams and you know, not it's the hardest thing right now has been to not be like, I've been so busy. Like, I've technically been working every weekend since February.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Yeah. So as soon as restaurants opened up, you know, GR Noir was like the wine and jazz bar and GR. They, you know, they opened that first week of February, and I played, you know, like I think 4 sets of music across that week. And
oh my gosh.
and then, you know, a couple weeks later, I did a Valentine's Day event for the listening room. And the piano that the listening room has is the owner's, like the grandmother in the Lokes family, the people who own Celebration Cinema. So there was a, you know, a very real, like, attempt from them to be like, hey, we got this piano. Let's, you know, create a dining space, even though we can't get back to full concerts, and you know, have somebody play it. And I worked that from end of February, like starting out as just doing solo piano, and then they had a budget for a trio, so I would alternate trios 2 nights a week for 4 months. And then
you went from like 0 to 100.
Yeah, there was no and that's, I've heard that from a lot of people, that there was no, like, it's like you almost needed a transition. Like, all right, we had a year of crazy, let's have a transition year and then get back to somewhere close to what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's at least showed me it's not sustainable. and you know, it's been tricky too, not having like all the things that I realized were kind of like the props of my 20s. Like, oh yeah, you know, having drinks on the gig, all the caffeine all the time. You know, just no, like, oh, what about water? Nah, I got, this has water in it. And what about sleep? I don't know if I got that. So yeah. Man. And I'm sure, because you moved to Chicago, so that's like a big change from last year.
Yeah, it's kind of been, I feel like this past weekend was the first time I kind of was still in a while, because I was working full time, and then after that was just packing, and then I moved, and then I had to come back to Grand Rapids almost immediately to do some recording, and I was there for like 4 days, and then I came back, and then I started a new job. And so there really hasn't been a break. I'm still not unpacked, but at this point, I'm kind of like, I have been here physically for less than 2 weeks, probably. Yep. So that's not a lot of time. I just need to like let myself be still. So this weekend, I didn't do anything. In my head, like the week prior, I was thinking like, oh, it's my first weekend. I don't have anything set going on. I'm going to just like unpack and really do it. And I woke up Saturday morning. It's just like, I'm just going to watch cartoons until I have to go anywhere, which is what I did.
Yeah, I'm shooting for that, you know, time in like, I think the first week of November, I'm able to, aside from, you know, I think that Monday, I can take all the other days off. And, yeah, I'm like, it's like, I just want like 2 days where I don't have to drive anywhere or like schedule something or edit something, or so I'm just getting all the, you know, podcasting things and things done ahead of time, so that it's not, partially because of the holidays too. Like, I don't want to be interviewing people like the week of Christmas or something.
Yeah. And like, I think probably around the same time for me because every weekend in October, I feel like I have things going on. And then I have to come back to Grand Rapids for almost an entire week. So it's like I've been back and forth a lot this month.
Yeah, it's just been nonstop. And then what's also annoying is like there's all this work, and then I have a lot of like pending income coming. So I'm just sitting here with like, all right, I spent the last of my physical cash to get Taco Bell. And
Oh,
I
I know
have
that
like a
feeling
20 I
so
can use for
well.
gas.
I know that feeling so well. I'm in that like weird lull of when you quit one job, but you're waiting to start another. And so I'll get my first paycheck this Friday after like 3 weeks of no income. And so, same thing. You're just like, I know the money's coming. We'll be okay. But we just got to get through this. It's been a lot of Hot Pockets and just like convenience food.
Yep.
But there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm just like, it's fine. Things often get harder before they get easier. It's
Yep.
okay. That's what I'm telling myself. So that's my wisdom to give.
Yeah, I saw well and I saw a meme that was it was kind of making fun of the people who are like, millennials, stop going to Starbucks and you'll be able to buy a house. And it's like, what? And the the list of things was like a typical expense list in whatever city they picked, and it was like $8 for like a breakfast combo somewhere, and then like $2,000 for rent, and then like $1,200 car repair, and then $8,000 towards loans or other expenses, however long the time period they looked at was. And then at the bottom it was like, and yeah, when Frank was able to cook from home, he saved $3 on his breakfast.
It's insane, right? And like it's so easy, I think, for that generation to think that way, just with how things were set up. I think not even how things were set up. It's not that things changed that much. It's our mindsets have changed. I think we are a generation that knows we deserve more. And I feel like from older generations, that gets seen as we are maybe brats that are just whining about things, and it's just like, I hear what you had to go through, but the point is, like, you shouldn't have. Not that you should be proud of it and projecting it onto the rest of us.
Right. Or like that, like, like I worked in unsafe work conditions and I expect that of my children. So I feel better.
Like, people don't have to suck it up anymore. That's what you want for humans.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, and it's crazy to think too that like as things around the world, continue to kind of be that like I don't even know if it's an ebb and flow. It's just like a company gets really big, they start outsourcing their labor to places that exploit their workers even more. And then they build an empire off of like 2 cents an hour labor in, Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they get, celebrity status almost for like, they achieved the American dream. And then meanwhile, it's on like a pile of like,
Other
underserved
people's
workers.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think all of the forced time that we had, like, at least for me, just because I didn't work for almost an entire year just because of the industry that I was working in. And it just, even the idea of going back was not sustainable. It wasn't safe. But then, looking for other work, going back into the workforce, it just like hits you like a ton of bricks. So once you're like forced out of it for a second and you sit back and you're like, wow, wow, we really were just doing that. And I can remember like a very specific time in my life where for me the goal was just to make 15 an hour. Like that was my big goal because I thought that was a lot of money. And that's what they're trying to still convince us is like a good amount of money. And I think people are just mad that we're not putting up with the BS anymore.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like simultaneously there's like the same energy that goes into being like, well, you made the choice to, go to college and take out loans and, like you didn't go right into the workforce. But then they're also upset that the education we got and the community of people that we met and could like, in real time be like, oh, you grew up in this environment. How was that? Oh, you worked here and that was like this, or, they're like, they like chastise people for like taking out loans to pay for school. And then they're also upset that we learn things that make us upset at the systems that they're trying to keep in place.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, do you just want us to pay out of pocket? How are we supposed to do that? Like I'm going back to school, and just one of my classes is $1,500. And I'm like, you times that by however much you're supposed to take, and you're looking at 50 plus grand for a bachelor's degree, and that's insane to ask an 18-year-old to commit to.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like the talks with, like when there's all the talks of debt forgiveness, it's one of those things that I don't know how it could ever pass, because it's like the optics of it are good for like, an administration or a certain politician, or like, a very, like, it just gets narrower and narrower of like who optically this helps, beyond the people who get their debt forgiven. It's like, all the Weasley like trying to co-sponsor bills, but they sneak in some other like, oh yeah, we'll approve, up to 20 grand. And you also have to expand the military budget more, or we'll, like, oh yeah, like the bill that passed recently that was like, was it like disabled students are able to like get debt forgiveness, but I think there's like other stuff in there that makes it like even more conditional.
Impossible. Yeah. And it's like, why are you like this? I feel like my brain is constantly just like, I have questions. I just have a few questions, I just want to know why. Why does this bring you joy? Do you think this is a good idea?
Why do you do this? And like, it's like, yes, there are 7 billion people on the planet, but eventually you're going to run out of, you would think, exploitable workers or people who, like maybe hundreds of years from now, we're just going to run out of like habitable countries. But it's like, it's a conversation I've been having with a friend who, her degrees are in, I think they're related to climate science. She works in climate change, like going to town hall meetings and like doing research, and she teaches at a college. She just started teaching a class. And one thing she noticed about a lot of her students, which I've also kind of seen in like younger generation meme culture, there's a lot of like doomerism stuff of
Yeah.
just like there's no hope. We're all dead. We'll never get it done in 12 years. We'll never do this in 10 years. Like, it's like they're educated, but then also like super pessimistic.
Yeah, yeah. And like I can see how easy it is to think that way, right? And it's really easy to slip into. I think for me, I recognize that things look very bleak and I hope it all goes okay, you know? I mean, there's a lot we can do and there's also only so much we can do, you know, with the bars that we have been given, and that's, you know, then those are the things that we're trying so hard to push back on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, I try to, because you know, music school always breeds that kind of like that cynicism that you're either like it's depressive, or you deflect it with humor to keep moving, or you just like ignore all the things to try and like, you know.
I mean, that's where we met.
Yeah. When you were you studying to be a classical voice major, or were you just taking lessons?
I was getting a BA in voice.
Okay.
Yeah, and it just feels like you're in a bubble.
Yeah.
You're in a tiny bubble. I don't know how often I even saw like anyone else outside of the music program, and I feel like I've been to 2 colleges so far, and it's the same. The music buildings are always these like very small, kind of like very isolated places, and that's like kind of all you see other than when you're going to your gen ed classes.
Right. Yeah, it's I can't, or I can't emphasize enough to other people who, you know, I caught up with after, you know, being in different colleges, or, you know, just touching base in general, the amount of, it's like for every drink you had at a party, that was an hour of practice time for me. It's like every party you went to, I was in a practice room. Every football game you went to, I was in a practice room. Every, you know, it's her birthday and there's like 50 people coming over to her house. Like, nope, practice room.
Don't have time. I tell people all the time, I'm like, music school is one of the hardest things I've ever done. Yeah. Like, it was, and you know, there were so many parts about it that I did love, but it was really hard. And, you know, while your peers are taking 12 credits and they might have 3 classes, we have like 6 for the same amount of credits.
Yeah.
Plus practice time. And I was just like, and I was explaining what juries are to my friend, and I'm like, yeah, it's probably fine for people who have who play instruments that aren't their bodies, but you know, waking up at 7 to go sing for my final was not a fun time.
No.
Not fun at all.
Yeah, and just the concept of like, you know, I always explain it as it's like if you weren't just taking a test, it was also like indicative of like your, like who you are as a human being.
Yeah.
And then you're doing it in front of the only people who can scrutinize you about as much as you do to yourself.
Yes, exactly.
In the same room in real time, just being like, all right, nope, no, that was good. Oh, missed that part. Mm-hmm. And just like, no.
Is it the same for pianists? Because I know, like, at least, you know, as a vocalist, when you're in your juries, it's not just about how you sing. It's your body posture. What are you doing with your body? How do you connect with your accompanimists? Like, it's everything. How do you look? How did you present yourself? And like, I don't know if all of that applies to as someone who plays a physical instrument.
Yeah, I guess not as much in terms of like the presence, I guess. Like obviously they keep track of like posture, I guess, and just how you, I guess they make notes. I don't know if it counts against your score, but I remember comments of like, just being more relaxed. And it's like, okay, yeah, but we're in the most stressful environment of our whole semester.
It's like, I know we practice for it with performing in front of our peers and things, but it's not the same.
No, it's and like I've never like there were in a way I joke that it helped me be more like mentally and emotionally prepared for other stuff, because there's like nothing as nerve-wracking like nothing will be as nerve-wracking as when I didn't have my juries prepared my sophomore year, and I tried to like cram like 16-hour days 4 days in a row for the for the jury, and like just getting there like half asleep, just like I know one of the songs. I'm accompanying 15 people, does that not count?
Yeah, like, I mean, no. You were also busy. You accompanied for me at one point.
Yep.
And a part of my brain also was like, how are students doing this right now? Like, don't they have things going on?
Yeah, well, and that's where like yeah, it's so like and that's another thing I tell people, like, music school, unless you have someone helping you in it and through it, like being a little more honest with like the process of it and like doing regular like checking in, there's not, it's very easy to get like, isolated, like in the music building. You have your peers and you're taking a class, practice room, class, rehearsal, class, run to Kirkhoff, get a smoothie, practice, class.
God, I ate so many bagels and smoothies as whole meals.
so many smoothies. And then also like anytime there's like a 2 for whatever deal on a drink or like an energy drink or something, it's like, all right, I'm getting 2 of those for $4
mm-hmm. Or yeah, it was an experience. I mean, especially having individual pieces and then having ensemble pieces, smaller ensemble pieces. And it's like, I have to study this because they expect me to know it, as opposed to like, I'm going to walk in here and you're going to teach me this song. It's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, it's so well. And that's where like, because I've, in my solo podcast, I did an episode of why I don't teach. And part of it is, I don't think I articulated it kind of in the, like you could draw that conclusion from some of what I was talking about. But part of it is just like, I haven't gotten over the intensity of my upbringing in music, basically going from like, I had 2 teachers when I was younger that, both super kind, patient. They helped me go from, method books to classical music pretty quick, and then, learning a little jazz. And I had a teacher who, like, we did a recital to end the school year, and then he found out he had like an advanced pancreatic cancer, and then he ended up just dying like over the summer. And that, wasn't a lot of time to really process that. It was just kind of like, oh, that's I didn't know that could happen that fast. And then I got a teacher who, we're friends now, but being in middle school, getting a very intimidating, like, could be very friendly, but also if you're not up to his standards, you'll feel it more than he'll like yell at you. It's just that feeling of like, he doesn't like it. Okay, I gotta go practice. And it's like that started, having him for a few years. And then I had a nicer teacher, but who was also, just super talented but very much trying to stick to the curriculum. So I felt like I couldn't deviate and like explore what I wanted to do as a pianist in our lessons beyond what was part of the curriculum. And just like then going to Western for my master's and having two different teachers and that whole roller coaster of like cramming a lot of stuff into 2 years.
Yeah, that's I can't even imagine if like just trying to get my bachelor's degree in music school and then going for a master's, like power to you. But you're as good as you are for a reason.
Yeah, it's been a lot of, I make the joke because I've been playing piano since I was 8 and I just turned 29. So it's like now my time learning piano can drink, and my, it's like, think of every marker in your life, every like, like, oh, my first date. Oh, like the first time I played, I don't know, high school football, or, oh, we won the championship at college, like any marker that whole time I was learning piano.
Yeah, those were the markers for you.
Yeah. It's just like, yes, I played sports. Yes, I did, other stuff through like area churches and stuff. But 90% of like my time, especially in college, more in college, that high school, I, spent a significant chunk because I had weekly lessons, but especially in college where, you're in like, I was like new music ensemble, jazz combo, accompanying, solo rep, gigging with the Gravestones and a jazz combo. And then like all the random pickup work. And then, the school being like, oh, we're doing a musical. You want to do it? It's just rehearsals 4 days a week and then 3 weekends of shows for 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
But
yeah, you can breathe now. You can take a little breath. I think you've earned it.
Yeah, I feel like the breather I should have taken last year, it sort of happened. Like I wasn't running around as much, and I was like getting more regular sleep, but there was still that part of my brain that's like, all right, you got all this time, work on something, provide your self-worth in a way that shows others that you are valuable instead of just like existing.
Yeah, I felt that a lot. I think as months kind of rolled into that initial lockdown, which was really intense, honestly. And I keep having to remind myself, like, that was really intense. We really went through something. But as months rolled on through that, I remember feeling like, how have I not made so much art, or yada, yada, yada. And I think, I don't know, it was kind of nice to at least get to a point where I allowed myself that kindness. And hopefully most of us got there to be like, we're grieving. Everything's kind of shit right now. And, like, even outside of just COVID stuff and being isolated, we all had our own personal life things that if those weren't going so well, it was compound with the isolation, compound with what was going on in society with collective grieving. And I was like, no wonder I didn't do anything for almost a year, because we just literally stopped. I stalled. We were a high engine car and we all just stalled.
Yep.
And I think we were all at a point where we were just overheating, right? And we had no choice.
Yeah, it definitely got to a point where well, for me, not until March, when I realized there was a lot of stuff that had kind of, you know, been exacerbated by 2020 that carried over from just other, you know, bad habits, whether it was like the work-life balance or, you know, health and wellness, or, you know, the time and thinking of work, like the time I was investing in things that I really wanted to pursue and work on versus, you know, taking too much work that was like, you know, it helped pay bills, but there were, you know, I could only do so many background gigs and like, you know, pick up subbing work and, you know, things that I'm just like, okay, this is fine, but and it makes me think of like, that's why so many people move out of Michigan, out of these music schools, because there's like, you feel like you're in kind of a rut with like some of the work opportunities you get, because there are pieces of the broader industry in Michigan, and there are a lot of like, you know, random people that, you know, like the producer we just worked with for Earth Radio's next album, he lives in Niles, and him and his wife back in 2003 started a broadcast sound company or broadcast media, or they worked with like, you know, the Tonight Show and like other, you know, network television shows to help with routing and producing audio for live events or whatever other things they did. And then he himself, Paul, would tour with a bunch of artists. And so, you know, there are people like him that they like aspects of living in Michigan, and they're here, and that's cool. You're not always connected to them though.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy. Like the way we got connected with Paul was because he knew, actually I'm at Third Coast right now, so the studio owner,
Oh yeah.
he and Bill are friends. So
Okay.
Bill sent our album we put out last year to kind of get the conversation going. At least that's how it was explained to me. Maybe it was a slightly different, but yeah. So it's like there are those times where like instead of saying no to stuff, they replace the yeses they're taking in one area with yeses in a different city. And
yeah,
that's arguably easier, I would say, in some regards, than like trying to reinvent or rework or reshape how you think of your income as a musician, which is what I'm trying to do, which is not easy.
yeah.
No part of it's ever been easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I learn a lot from it, and I think more musicians will get there. Not that every musician has to be like a media personality, but like more musicians will like bring other creative skills into, you know, like even the people who just learned like, oh, I know how to live stream now, and maybe that is the catalyst for like having a robust online presence enough to like warrant touring or something.
No, that makes a lot of sense too. I think for me, playing with Okaycool, I feel like that was the hardest part of it for me, was figuring out how to be a presence, you know, in my everyday life with my friends. Like, I'm super goofy and dumb, and I'm really just a dweeb. And like, but as far as like, you know, it's learning how to bring that everywhere is so hard. It's so hard. And it's just like, okay, how do I not be boring? And then you start to overthink not being boring. That was definitely my struggle, was like, how do I just be my natural self when I'm being a presence? You know what I mean? And just figuring out how to blend the two. And, you know, going forward, it will probably still be something I figure out. or continue to try to figure out. But yeah, it's just interesting that you brought that up because I feel like I thought about that a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I'm in a weird spot too where I know that I'm known a lot by musicians, and I'm starting to get the tiptoe of being noticed more by the public. And with that comes there's like the mixture of responsibility, but then there's also the thought of like all the various jobs that I do. There is a through line in terms of like how I interact with people and, the patience and trying to solve problems instead of create them. But then it's like you want to,
I like that.
yeah. It's like you want to,
a lot of people.
right. Well, and like and then the other thing comes up of like, school it prepares you for being on a stage, but it doesn't prepare you for being on every type of stage scenario. So, I'm trying to figure out, and trying to kind of let go of some of those reservations of like how I'm perceived so that I can open myself up to like, how do I act on stage with Earth Radio versus, my other trio, or how do I, how am I interacting with the band when I'm playing with Mark Lavengood versus, yesterday I subbed with May Erlewine's band, and that was like, it was fun because I had already known half of those band members from various things, and everyone else in the band's just super nice. But there's also that like, it's like, all right, I gotta look like I'm having fun, even though I had a week to prepare all this and I'm trying to remember all the songs, and I only have charts for some of them. And I like the second tune, I didn't know it was a Ray Charles song, but luckily I knew it was, I'd already played that song, but I played it in the wrong key when I started it. So I had to like, I'd started the intro, and then when the horns came in, I'm like, oh no. And then the bass player's like, we're in C. And I had to like, they're in C now.
Perfect.
Like, okay.
It was the intro transition.
Right. It's like, I could feel more open to letting loose when I know what's when I know what's coming, but also if I know, like in Earth Radio, we've played a lot together and we know how to listen and, interact as a band. But it, some people are really good at that wherever, they're like a personality wherever they go.
Yeah.
Or, even someone as, socially awkward as Mono Neon, like he's a presence everywhere he goes just because he's got a distinct bass sound and he's just really good. And so there's that opposite too of like, oh, this guy's literally just been doing his own thing ever since he found the colors, the neon colors. And now it makes more sense that he's able to, kind of pop in like, oh, I'm in Dallas with this band, but then I'm in Memphis with this band. And then I'm in, I'm tour with Ghost Note. And so that's been interesting to like have so many years kind of in the musician space and not really interacting that much with the public. And then this year having a lot of public facing events with the residency and, the outdoor concerts, a lot more people coming out to shows because they haven't been to shows in a year. So there's always that thought of presenting.
I wonder too, because I feel like in some ways my brain works similar to yours, and like playing with bands has been like a fairly recent thing for me. And I had always played solo for a long time. And when you're doing that, you're not really expected to do a whole lot. When you're just up there with a guitar and you're doing your singer-songwriter thing. And I think in a similar way, where for you it might have been from your instructors and internalized, and me, I don't know where it came from, but just internalized, like so focused on doing things right and wanting it to be right and wanting it to be good, that has often overshadowed like what I'm giving, like if I'm giving like myself.
Right.
And it's definitely gotten better over time, especially with learning how to play with the band and like learning how to translate whatever the heck it is that vocalists try to explain things to other musicians, which is very abstract. And half the time I hear what I'm saying and I'm like, listen, I know this sounds insane. I know when I tell you that I want you to make that sound like a triangle, that means nothing. And that's just like how vocalists talk, I feel like.
Right.
And they're like, what? I'm like, oh, no one knows what I'm saying. This is like all like choir talk. That's how they teach us. We can't see our instruments, so it's a lot of weird freaking visualization.
Yeah, it's well, and that's been part of like, that is one thing I'm grateful for with all the performing experience, is that I have a lot of ways to get my point across, to depending on who I'm talking to. Because with Earth Radio, Madison George, he left for Nashville, but David Ward also, he studied, his dad's a jazz pianist and professor, and he went to U of M, and it's like, okay, I went through music school, he went through music school, so we understand, everything from, all right, you have 3 months to prepare these tunes for a panel of, jury things. And then there's also those like, hey, this guy got sick tomorrow. We need you to. So
my gosh.
We've had to continue to streamline how we learn music and communicate within a group, so that the consensus of like, it's not being hung up on like, oh, is that a major or minor? It's like, nope, this is C minor, and play it and we're done. Like, we only have an hour.
No, that makes a lot of sense too, especially when I feel like as a pianist, you are often with other people. And that is a little bit of a drawback of being a vocalist, I would say, because I mean, even in ensembles, you're all kind of you're working on the same thing for the most part. The people in your section are working on the same part you're singing, and you know that in relation to whatever the soprano's doing or whatever. And so at least throughout a lot of that college experience and stuff before you kind of get into real world performing, you don't get as much experience with that, a lot of that cross communication with other musicians. And so that was definitely a learning curve for me, someone who had historically always written my music by myself, always recorded everything by myself in my little bedroom. And like was so used to having all of that process be so internal and like close, and then bringing it outward more, it was very scary and vulnerable. And I was surprised by initially how almost protective of some things I felt. And it definitely was like, it helped me a lot to let go, and me just reminding myself the reason I am working with people is because I want to take this somewhere that my brain won't, because I can only do whatever I will do. And that's why you work with other people, And so kind of letting go of those reins, like, hey, you've done this alone your whole life, but like, you don't have to. You can let other people change things and move things, and it can still feel just as good and dynamic. And so I think that has been probably the best thing for me with being able to play with the guys and just expand the way that I think about writing music, because I've been writing songs since I was in elementary school, basically. I think that is kind of where my niche lies. I haven't explored it too much to an extent of like, I think I would like to write for other people, but I haven't explored that as much, but I feel like it could be fun.
Yeah, well,
I feel like this experience would have helped at least.
Right. Well, and yeah, like when you mentioned, you know, the expanding of everything you do working with other people, I've been seeing a lot of, you know, I think of people like I don't know if you ever met Madeline Grant before she moved.
Who's that? Sorry, I missed it.
Oh, Madeline Grant.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah, she, and really I only met her a couple times through Blue Water Kings, but she originally was living in Detroit, and she, you know, great singer, which doesn't guarantee anything because it's like, you know, there's a million great pianists and singers and guitarists, and but she expanded her career specifically through a lot of very deliberate opportunities that I, you know, eventually I want to, you know, chat with her about it, but like it seemed like she went from, yeah, you know, I got some songs and I'm recording them in Detroit, and got this artist and to make the, you know, single and album art, and you know, it's cool. And then she did like, I think she did a feature with Odessa and then FKJ, Scary Pockets, and like one other, like just bam, 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 like almost back to back. And that, you know, was kind of her like launching pad to go to LA, just having like, you know, these, you know, like, oh, it's an FKJ song, it's going to get at least 1 million hits. Or like Odessa, it's like they've got a lot of hits and a lot of listeners. And, you know, I saw it with her. My friend Brooklyn Cole has been doing that with her move. She lives in Harlem right now, and she, you know, moved out there only knowing a small amount of people, but she, you know, she works like a day job, and then she's able to connect with people she met when she went to school in Utah, and people she knows back here because she's originally from, I think, Holland. And she's like, in the absence of having a band, you know, she's doing the solo stuff. But then if she wants the band recordings, like she came in April and we recorded a song together with a band, and, you know, she flew to Florida and she works with like some artists there. I think with like in conjunction with like a church that she, like a CCM church that just has a, you know, you look at their broadcast and it's like, oh, they have like a professional video and audio team. And so it's been interesting seeing like singers kind of like understanding inherently like, all right, I don't know if I want a band. I don't know if I want to do this. I kind of like collaborating with just all sorts of people just to kind of get a taste for things. And yeah, I think that's an interesting route, because usually I see singers as like, they're either like the soloist career, you know, like they have an accompanist, or they're featured with the symphony, or they're, you know, doing that kind of stuff, or they, you know, like have some sort of band or some sort of thing that people know them from, that, you know, that builds audience along the way. But I don't know, there's also American Idol, so there's those type of things too for singers. But
I'm gonna call out my mom here for a second. Like, just as a youth, my mom has always been super supportive of the music, to the point where when I didn't initially go to school for a music degree. She was very hurt by that. She was just like, I don't understand. Why aren't you going for music? And I'm like, do you know this is very backwards from most people's experience? But as a youth, she was always like, oh, you should go on this show or that show. And I was like, Mom, no. I love you and I love that you have that faith in me, but that's not my thing. And that's also not how I sing. That is a very specific brand of singer. And I'm okay.
Yeah, it's and it's funny having like, because my dad's side of the family, all my uncles, they're all musicians, and like college horn professor, symphony oboe player, and studio engineer / cellist / pianist / prep academy instructor.
Oh my God.
And with all of that all over the country, growing up, there was at least seeing every one of them had like, oh, this is the main thing I do, and then there are a bunch of like supplemental stuff that helps either with income or skill sets that can inform the main thing. And my uncle in Massachusetts, he was on vacation in California, and it was around the time American Idol was doing auditions, and my cousin, she was like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 at the time, and was just like, oh, you should totally audition. And he went and auditioned, and they had like, the judges there were like people sourced from like probably music schools in the area. And one of the judges had perfect pitch, and he sang a couple tunes that he knew really well from gigging, and didn't really like lean into the fact that he was a studied musician. He was just kind of like, yeah, I'm just here to audition because my daughter thought it'd be fun. And he like sang a couple notes like slightly out of tune, like probably something higher or something, or lower. And one of the judges was like, yeah, you sang that great, but there was a couple notes that were a little bit flat. And then he was like, yeah, I probably could have, I didn't hit that A flat there on the second verse. And then he was like, oh, do you have perfect pitch? And she's like, yeah, how do you know that term? Just like starting to get like, you're not some things. And he's like, you got me. I'm actually a studied musician. She's like, well, I don't really care. Like, you could go on if you wanted to. And he's like, no, I don't. I don't need to go. I'm already in a music career.
Expectations were already so low. Gosh.
Just like,
which I get it, right? They're looking for a lot of these homegrown stories, whatever. So they're not really expecting that. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny that he could have just gone on to the next round if he wanted, but that's, he does a million things. So why would he like get on American Idol? It's like, yeah, they want the like, I'm 19 and I'm from a small farm town in a place you've never been to. And, everyone in my town is supporting me. They're all watching at home. And then they send a crew out to this town and they film them watching it at the community center at someone's house. And then they sing like, I don't know, a Taylor Swift song, and and everyone loves it. And then they're cheering at home, we got the ticket. And then it's like, all right, we could use her for, the next 5 episodes until she gets cut. And then
then it goes to someone else, and it's like, who can belt the highest? Essentially, which, like, yes, very impressive. I cannot. And I think that's what I mean by like very specific brand of singer with those type of shows. And even from a young age, and it's probably why I kind of stopped watching a lot of those singing shows, because I felt like from a young age, I kind of knew where my voice was, where it lied, and I understood that I had a lower register than most other, women in my choirs and stuff like that. And I was just like, that's not gonna be me. Just yeah, I think I was saying like from a young age, I kind of knew as far as where singing is like where lanes weren't. And I was like, the type of voice that they're looking for and what you need to kind of be a pop singer, at least as we know it,
Right.
for top 40 pop, that kind of a thing. I was like, that's not my lane. In the same sense that I knew my voice wasn't made for theater. That's not my lane, And it just, I was very good at being like,
Yeah, which is hard to do as a, someone who wants to do music. You want to feel like, oh, I can take on whatever work and I can make anything work and I'm just happy to be in music.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you just realize you took on more work that you didn't like doing and just get frustrated. And
Yeah, and I think, there not being a lot of representation of like female singers with lower voices. I was just kind of like, I don't know, I'll figure out whatever it is that I do. But it's not those things.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like you, I think it's definitely better to like know your goals and yourself as an artist than dipping too far into letting other people dictate what they think you'd be good at or what you would want to do. Because I have examples of like with the new music ensemble, I didn't know I wanted that world until I was in it, and then when I was in it, I'm like, oh, I need this the rest of my life at some point. Playing in contemporary chamber ensembles and then there's other times where it's like, hey, can you do, what was it? When someone recommended me to work at a Catholic church, and that was just awful. So bad. It's like underpaid and like I was hired to be like a high school choir accompanist, and then the first service that we were playing, in my head, I'm like, okay, we have these 5 songs or 4 songs or whatever in the mass, and we know where they are in the schedule. I'll just take in this experience because I've never been in a Catholic mass. And then like almost immediately, it's silent, like they do something in the order of the service and then it's silent for a second. And the high school choir director looks at me and he's like, oh, you're supposed to go up there and play. And I'm like, what? Play what? And then they like plop this like book down and I'm like, okay, I'm not Catholic. I don't know. It's like, oh, turn to this. Yeah, I'm like looking at the, the sign on the wall, like, okay, page 222. And then like this church was like the only, they're like, yeah, we're one of the only churches that sings the Nicene Creed. And I'm like, no. And it was just like 2 lines of music, no like bars. It was just like, I had to like sight read the melody and then like look at the, the priest and just like, okay, he's singing and we have and he's like looking at me like
anticipating and predicting.
Yeah, and he's just like, there were times where he would just kind of glare at me like, you're offending Jesus. And I'm like, is that even it? Okay, is Jesus in Catholicism? I don't remember. I'm just
be like, wow, playing gospel is much easier.
Playing, yeah. The rock oriented Christian music is way easier.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't. I can't even. I mean, I feel like I know so many musicians who like went the church route because they're always hiring musicians and they pay you. But I don't know if anyone like really enjoys it that wasn't already like a member of that church.
Yeah.
It's just a gig.
Yeah, it's so well, and it depends too on the church, because like, you know, that Catholic church, they hired me, you know, and they were like, oh, the director of all the music stuff, she's going to be leaving and I'm going to take her position, so your pay will go up in like 2 months. And I was making like, you know, like I think it was like $50 to do like a rehearsal and a service. And then I was driven out by the director, and like all he wanted to talk about was Notre Dame. So I was just like sitting there being like, can we talk about anything else? Anything. Like, I know you just got a new sign for your man cave bar and you're going to watch the Notre Dame game, and this is literally your only personality quality at all. Like,
that sounds like a very boring life to me. But you know, what can I say? I'm also like sitting in my room watching anime a lot of the time. So like, same, different. I don't know.
Well, it was just like, it was kind of, it felt like purgatory, just being like, we're just sitting in this car talking about Notre Dame for like hours.
Oh my God.
Just like, I can't.
I love the assumption that everyone else is interested in hearing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to talk about this thing for hours because you all obviously want to know.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Well, and it's like, at least with podcasting, it's like it's labeled and you can read a description and make your own decision. But when it's like random conversation, it's like, I don't want to be like, hey, I don't care. It's like on the list of things, I didn't know I cared the least about it, but it's there.
Yeah. If you say something like, oh, I'm not really into sports, then it turns into a whole other conversation, more than likely, that you don't want to get into. So you might as well just let them talk about it.
Yep. It's like, you have your thing.
Just save your peace.
Well, and there's times too where it's like, you know, I'm sure I'll run into them again just because of life being weird sometimes. But there's times where I think about, you know, like sometimes with like doing shows, you interact with someone and it's really weird. Like they're hammered and they're just saying whatever, and they probably won't remember that they talked to you. And then in your head, you're like, I'm never going to see this person again. So I'll just humor, or like literally just leave. Like, okay, like, oh, you're talking about that? Cool. Okay, bye. Just walk away.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really good at that with shows, at like the polite walk away. Oh, I gotta go talk to that person now. See ya. Or just like, I'm really good at just kind of cutting off conversations in a way that I think is not super obvious. And I'm like, especially with things like shows, and if you're anything like me, I'm like, I know that I have a pretty set energy reserve, and I want to give as much as I can to people if they came to see me, or they want to talk to me. And so I can't spend 10 minutes on the drunk dude. So I'm going to cut you off and I'm going to go, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely, because I always seem to be the last one to tear down, and it's usually because I'm, talking with people after the show, whether it's the crew or the, people coming up to the stage, or, whatever random thing. And then there's a point where that, the high of coming off of a show starts to wane, and you're like, oh no, I'm starting to get tired.
And they're
and they're so enthusiastic, and they came all the way here. Yeah, I appreciate that. And yep, this is great. You're great. I'm tired.
And that's the part where your brain goes into, now I'm in work mode, because this is part of it. Now I have to network. I have to be, bubbly, charismatic, and it can take a lot out of you, and not for not being appreciative. Because anytime anyone has ever come to talk to me after a show, like, sensitive is not the word that I'm looking for, but I'm just like, wow. Like, that is very touching to me, even if I don't look like it.
Yeah.
I'm very touched right now. And mostly I'm probably just slightly overwhelmed because I don't know what to do with all these compliments or those kind of things, but yeah, that definitely can feel taxing sometimes because you want to give them the same enthusiasm, but then you have to do it for like 20 people.
Yeah. Yeah, I had someone who like, he told me that I was very important to him. And I was like, okay, that's very
like that's very meaningful.
Yeah, I'm like, it's there's that, there's always that like processing. Okay, part of me is like, that's so cool. Like, that's such an endearing thing, and I'm glad I can, provide, that, maybe it's an escape, maybe it's inspiring. I don't know, like, whatever I'm doing that you dig, like, I'm glad to be doing it. And then there's that other part of me that's like, how, I guess my only way to reciprocate that is to keep doing that, because I like, what do I you're very important.
Sometimes saying thank you doesn't feel like enough, and I think
Yeah,
that's where the awkwardness comes in sometimes. Because I'm like, I feel like I should say something more than thank you. I want them to know that I mean it, and then I just end up being like, oh wow, thanks.
Thank you so much. Just like, yeah, you want to like be like, oh, you said that to me. Well, look at this. I just, I wrote this whole album for you.
For you. By the end of the night, you've got 15 new singles out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
It's all over and it's, it's usually good. Like, I can't say that I have too many, like usually if it's bad, it's because somebody's like they're drunk or they're high and they just don't understand. They have no awareness of like what's happening around them. Yeah, they're like, hey, you're up here, everyone else is down here. Like, maybe
Thankfully,
chill.
so far I haven't had anyone be too obnoxious that way. So I'm thankful for that. I do remember my bassist Maddie telling me that some guys came up to her after one of our shows or said something to someone that she knows, and the only comment was that we were all so hot. And I was just like, okay, thanks. Did you hear us?
Hear what?
Did you know that we played music just now? Is this what you came for? Like, we know. Tell us our music is good.
Yeah. It's so that happens.
The peril,
right?
Being a femme in music.
Yeah, I see that happen to like, and it's always so like, you can totally tell which dude is gonna do it. Like, that happens to Hannah. Like, we'll get done and it starts with like, oh, how you sang was so beautiful, and you're beautiful, and I want to take you home. And it's like, no.
And they think it's so seamless and smooth, and I'm just like, come on, man. I have been performing solo open mics, now in bands for years. I cannot tell you how many times I have had like a beer breath like too close to my face.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. A nice part about, I will say, playing with a band versus going and playing solo shows by myself. And I'm pretty good at handling myself. I have pretty good, strong boundaries, but it's always nice to have your people there with you.
Yes.
Regardless.
Yeah, it's so much nicer to have any sort of person that can help with an out, or help end a conversation, or
yeah, especially because if they know you're by yourself, you're not leaving. You're talking
right
to them for the rest of the night.
just like
You're just like, I want to go to the bathroom, and then you never go back. That was my life as a solo artist, basically.
just gonna hide until everyone's gone.
Yeah, and they'll just like frolic around and be like, oh, yeah, no, we're not finishing that conversation.
Yeah, and that's where like it's always so weird when you think of an audience, because there are very few times where I know that I've performed for people that are all there to see what I'm doing. Most of the time it's a blend of like, oh, they got caught in the crossfire between dinner and going home, and now they're checking out a set of music, or these guys came to drink and watch the game regardless of what's going on, which that happened a lot when I worked at Founders. People just, getting into a football game when like this like intimate folk music is playing on stage.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Just like, it's weird how people, and part of me hoped, and I guess, I've seen a more positive trend overall with the shows I played this year. I was hoping with like last year, the people who, normally go to shows, they would have more of an appreciation for that environment. Mm-hmm. But I also forget that the people who are usually problems at any show, they don't care about anything but what they're doing.
They probably have been going out the entire time. It's those kind of folks. And
right.
Kind of on the realm of that, I will say the nice thing is about like, as we were playing more and more as Okaycool, I was like, wow, like as far as audiences go, femmes in a crowd are very protective of other femmes, especially if you're a performer, and so like having just like other bystanders who are there just listening to you, they don't know you, being like, are you good? Or just like, is this dude bothering you? They're very much so is a sense of kind of solidarity in that.
Yeah, I definitely, I hope that going into next year, when it looks like I'll be playing more shows with Earth Radio, and we'll be doing some more, like,
let me know when you're in Chicago.
Yeah, we're definitely looking to get back in Chicago to do. I would love to hit Chicago like 3 times next year, like do at least, 2-3 days, 4 days, if we can get, partner up with a band like we did. Yeah. And more, if there's even, if we sneak into some concert series on a Wednesday, or, it's looking like, we'll have more traveling. I know next month we're doing 2 dates in Ohio, so that'll be the first time the band's been out of state since like fall of 2019.
Yeah.
So that'll be, and it's our first time out of state since then. And then usually when we would go as a 4-piece, we would take Madison's car because he had a Jeep, and we would, work it out to backline some gear so that we could all fit in one car. But I think we're going to have to take 2 cars.
Yeah, that's usually what we did. And it's, it's kind of a shame that, like, I think for us, the beginning of 2020 really kind of felt like things were starting to ramp up. We had kind of more out of the city, out of state shows planned, and that was really exciting. But obviously everything kind of halted, and then I decided to move. So So, that kind of throws a little wrench into things. But we did get to record like our entire set of songs live, and that was really nice to do. Even if it just ends up, we haven't decided what we're going to do with them yet, but even if it just ends up for posterity, it's going to be really nice to just have those. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm only 2 hours away, so you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Always that opportunity. But yeah, glad we could, sit down and chat for a good chunk of time, and hearing more about the move and all the, the last year of just everyone's had a version of insanity, so it's nice
almost
to like
2 years of catching up in an hour and a half.
Yeah. Nice, and trying to consolidate, like, okay, what did I do the last 6 years?
Yeah, without all the really sad stuff.
Right.
No one wants to hear that podcast.
Yeah, don't mind talking for however long or short, so but yeah, thanks again for coming on. Where should people find what you're doing? I know you just moved to Chicago, but I'm sure at some point you'll do some music stuff.
Yeah, the best place is likely my Instagram, which is shell.in.bones. I post, if any music updates happen, they'll be cross-posted on my personal Instagram, as well as the other art that I do will be posted there as well, because I have multiple pages, but they all get shared on my personal page, and that's where they get the most views anyway.
Right.
So yeah, that would be the best place to reach me, Shell and Bones.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm sure that Okaycool will pop up somewhere, and people can see that happen again too at some point.
Oh yeah, I definitely will probably be at least sending an update or something like that. Obviously, social media presence has been really slow on that front, but you can expect some updates from that soon. All right. Well, thank you for having me, and I hope you have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, no problem. I will wrap things up and go sleep.
All righty. Bye.
See ya. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this conversation. It was great catching up with Alana, and it's so funny to think, from when I met her when we were both at Grand Valley State to now, just the journeys we both had to kind of, figuring out the types of artistic work we want to do and the people we want to surround ourselves with. So it's always nice to touch base with a friend and a fellow artist, fellow creative, and just, see what we're both up to. And, that's the fun of this podcast, is catching up with folks, introducing you all to new folks that you might not have heard of in the process. So if you dig these types of podcasts, like I mentioned, you can support on patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker. You can share, like, subscribe, follow, any prompts on any social media or any, service. All those things help the algorithm and all the metrics and all that good stuff. So I appreciate your support, and we will see you in the next episode of Mitten Backstage. Take care.